Welcome back. Now back to our lead story. SABC News reporter Khayelihle Khumalo has been following those developments of the ICJ ruling on the preliminary objections that were raised by the Russian Federation in the case of Ukraine versus the Russian Federation. He joins us now in studio to unpack more. Let's quickly backtrack, Khaya, I think for the benefit of those that were not following this case. Interesting is how the Ukraine brought this case to the ICJ just as South Africa had taken Israel to the very same court on almost similar accusations, right? But Russia was, of course, objecting these accusations. Take us through the basis of the Russian Federation and what they were actually objecting.
Well, that's right, Alicia. So in essence, I mean, this goes back as far back as in 2014, because one of the main motives by Russia invading Ukraine as far back as in 2014 had to be the basis that they used, that they wanted to protect the Russian speakers in eastern parts of Ukraine, especially around Donetsk and Luhansk regions. But of course, Russia was saying that the Kyiv regime had all these genocidal intent. So that's why this particular, just intervention that we saw, but also apart from that, the annexation of Crimea Peninsula. So that's a very critical part of it. But then you go back to 2022, where Ukraine now went to the ICJ in light of the full-scale invasion by the Russian Federation, where Ukraine was saying that this is totally against the Genocide Convention, because that was used by Russia as well, saying that there was a genocide underway. Obviously, Ukraine vehemently denied those accusations. But when you look at today's ruling, it's quite interesting, Alicia, because it looks at the issue of jurisdiction. Russia was objecting, saying that it's against the ICJ scope. But of course, the ICJ is saying, well, this case must go ahead. But also another important element into this case will have to be the processes. So the issue of Russia saying that Ukraine was abusing this particular platform. But also what is very much important about this particular case is that Ukraine has been very clear in saying that the invasion of its territory by Russia, once again, is against the obligations of the convention.
Now, this judgment has just been delivered not more than an hour ago, Khaya, and I'm sure a lot of you experts like yourselves as well are still trying to study the judgment. But you say that the ICJ basically ruled in favor of most of Ukraine's preliminary objections that were raised by Russia in what was a very complex ruling. Please just try and simplify it for us.
A very complex ruling, especially because, I mean, it's quite a host of objections that were raised by Russia. But of course, the court was very scathing because, once again, if you go back to 2022, it's made it patently clear that the Russian Federation must withdraw its special military operation. So the operation should be discontinued. But to this particular point, that operation is still underway, especially when you look at the eastern part of Ukraine, where the counter-offensive from Ukraine has not succeeded, where Russia has been annexing so many parts, once again, two republics, so so-called republics, because when you look at how the international recognition of Donetsk and Luhansk, it's not really widely recognized, especially by the UN members. It's only Russia that is recognizing those two republics located within the territorial space of Ukraine. But also what is very important in this regard as well is that the ICJ was very much in recognition of the suffering of the Ukrainians, the displacement, and all sorts of rights that have been violated. As you know, that when it comes to the war, the indiscriminate attacks. But what has been the key argument as well for Russia is that for them, they want to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. And that's why this particular operation has been ongoing.
Khaya, please clarify this discrepancy in the SA versus Israel case, where, of course, the ruling says a state can't seek objections of genocide while a war is still ongoing. And I think that's what we just heard a couple of minutes ago.
Well, that's absolutely right, because obviously when you look at the Genocide Convention, it's quite very clear in terms of the responsibilities of the state and those who have signed it in terms of upholding the principles. But also what is very important in this regard is that when you look at now the global focus, really, it's mainly really just focusing on what's happening between Palestine and, the Middle East war, so to speak. So, and it's quite interesting because, recently when the Ukrainian Foreign Affairs Minister Khumalo was in South Africa, he raised that issue, saying that there might be quite a lot of focus going to what's happening in Gaza, but also saying that as Ukraine, they'll continue to push for, in terms of the military aid, and we know it's a very contentious issue. You look at the divisions that are coming out in the US Congress. You have those who are saying that the Biden administration should really focus on domestic issues. Recently, we saw the EU defense ministers meeting. You do have countries like Hungary who are totally opposed to the military aid going to Ukraine, obviously having their own objections, but also eventually there was a deal that was sealed by the Ukraine, those countries supportive of Ukraine, because they say this is quite a very decisive moment in terms of making sure that Russia is defeated.
I suppose we need to then just stay on the story, and we'll see what happens, as of course the ICJ ruled that of course these deliberations need to continue. So we'll be hearing from you shortly with more analysis on that case. That is SABC reporter there, Khayelihle Khumalo, in studio with us with more details on the recent ICJ judgment in the Ukraine versus Russian Federation case.